right. We'll be starting the webinar in just a few minutes. Thank you for joining. We'll be getting started in a couple of minutes. And we'll get started in another minute. Greetings. This is Sophia Asan of the Reproductive Health Supplies Coalition. Welcome to this webinar hosted by the Safe Abortion Supplies Workstream of the Coalition's Caucus for New and Underused Reproductive Health Technologies. I'll share a few quick housekeeping notes as we get started. Please do keep yourselves muted throughout the webinar unless you're speaking. You may enter questions or comments into the chat at any time. We'll address those at the end of the webinar in a Q&A portion as time permits. Today, we are very pleased to share with you a webinar on a recent medical abortion market assessment that was conducted in Argentina by the Concept Foundation in collaboration with CEDES. This was commissioned by the Reproductive Health Supplies Coalition and funded by an anonymous donor. We will have three primary presenters with us today. Petra Proctor is a program manager for Concept Foundation's manufacturing and development functional pillar, and she has been coordinating and managing projects focusing on improving access to quality of SRH medicines for the last 10 years. More recently, Petra has been leading Concept's ongoing activities in low and middle income countries, and she was the project manager overseeing the conduct of the market assessment and the collaboration with CEDES. We also have with us Jason Bauer. Jason is an independent medicine quality consultant. He has extensive experience in procurement and supply management in LMICs, and he has in-depth knowledge of the dynamics of supply of MA medicines at the international and national levels. He played a direct role in the conduct and write-up of the market assessment, working closely with CEDES. Our third presenter is Alessandra Tomasini. Alessandra is Concept Foundation's Chief Technical Advisor, and she has been the technical lead supporting Concept in its quality work for the last 10 years. She's a pharmacist by training, and she's currently based in her home country of Brazil. Alessandra played an integral role in completion of the market assessment, and she also represented Concept in the follow-up meeting held with the Argentinian Ministry of Health. So with that, I am pleased to hand off to our first presenter, Petra.
Thank you, Safia. Good morning, good afternoon, and possibly good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar, where we will be presenting the market assessments for medical abortion drugs that Concept Foundation has conducted in partnership with CEDES, with funding from the RHSC Innovation Fund. Very quickly before starting the presentation, I would like to express our sincere thanks to Mariana Romero and Silvia Ramos from CEDES for their support and collaboration in preparing for this webinar, as well as more broadly throughout the project as our partners on the ground. We would also like to thank colleagues on the ground in Argentina from ANLAP, PrEP, as well as the Ministry of Health, as well as additional colleagues from Concept Foundation and the RHSC for their inputs and support in completing this valuable piece of work. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to briefly go over the agenda for the webinar, we have divided today's webinar into two parts. Part one will cover the market assessment, its objectives, the methodology, the key findings and conclusions, as well as providing an overview, a brief overview of the project and the context within which it was conducted. And we will also briefly introduce the two organizations that completed the assessments. Part two will highlight a critical outcome of the assessment and broader element of the overall project, which was the convening of stakeholders on the ground in Argentina, following the conclusion of the assessment, where Concept Foundation and CEDES had the opportunity to present to the Argentinian Ministry of Health, as well as other public officials, key stakeholders, and representatives along the supply chain for medical abortion products, the results of the market assessment and the key recommendations going forward. And it also provided us with a valuable opportunity to engage in dialogue about how to address the existing barriers and challenges that were identified by the market assessment. Next slide, please. So I will very briefly go over the next few slides. I'll provide a project overview and background before handing over to Jason Bauer, who will go into the finer details of the outcomes of the market assessment and how it was conducted. Next slide, please. So I imagine most of you in the audience will know Concept Foundation well, but for those of you who are new to us, I'll briefly introduce us. We are an international not-for-profit organization working on improving access to sexual and reproductive health medicines and technologies. We work globally, but we have a primary focus on low and middle income countries. We were founded in 1989 with support from the WHO RHRP program. I won't try to list out all those organizations. You can see them on the slides. We operate out of offices in Bangkok, Thailand and Geneva, Switzerland. And our mission is to ensure equitable access to essential sexual and reproductive health technologies that are affordable and of assured quality for all. We do this by engaging with policymakers and other key public sector stakeholders and providing support to the private sector in meeting international quality assurance standards, defining optimal regulatory pathways, and supporting business case development for accessing low and middle income markets with quality assured and affordable sexual and reproductive health products. Next slide, please. So CEDES was founded in 1975 as a non-profit, independent and pluralistic civil society organization. It develops research activities in social sciences, training of human resources, and technical assistance. The mission of CEDES is to strengthen the development of research and train human resources in research, guided by quality standards and a commitment to contribute to social debate, as well as to the design, implementation, and evaluation of public policies, the formulation of normative frameworks, the strengthening of accountability, and the conduct of informed advocacy. Next slide, please. So the backdrop to this project and to the market assessment was the very recent legalization of abortion in Argentina, which took place in December 2020, and a commitment by the Argentinian government to the implementation of this law by the best possible standards, which was really a groundbreaking and historic moment, which will, going forward, sustain public policy work to improve the quality of abortion and post-abortion care. The project draws on the vast experience of the public and community health teams and stakeholders that were engaged in completing the market assessment, and their experience in accompanying and assisting women accessing abortion services in Argentina. The project also builds on a wealth of evidence of the potential negative effects of the use of substandard abortion drugs and services. Next slide, please. As well as a breadth of evidence and studies that have demonstrated comparative savings beyond prevention of morbidity and mortality from the provision of safe abortion care versus the provision of unsafe abortion and the complications arising from those incidences. The project also takes advantage of the opportunity from the RHSC Innovation Fund and FORLAC and the funds provided by the anonymous donor to complete this work and complement ongoing initiatives in Argentina. And finally, the project builds on the commitment and experience of both Concept Foundation and CEDES, both as institutions committed to public health and with a rich history of collaboration with governments and other key actors and stakeholders to bring about their organizational missions. Next slide, please. So before handing over to Jason, I will just briefly go over the overall project aims and objectives. The aim of the project was to support the Argentinian Ministry of Health to establish criteria and a supportive environment for ensuring access to quality, assured, and affordable medical abortion supplies and care. The project had three main objectives, the primary objective being the conduct of the market landscape analysis of medicines for medical abortion and medicines regulation. And to document these findings, objective 2 was to document the findings and key recommendations of the market analysis into a formal report to allow stakeholders and enable key actors to rapidly and sustainably introduce quality assured and affordable medical abortion products within the context of the new legal framework. And then the final objective was to convene a stakeholder meeting in 2021 following the completion of the market assessment, bringing together key government and other stakeholders to facilitate the registration of new medical abortion products in Argentina. Of course, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it was not possible to have this stakeholder meeting in person. But we were able to hold a virtual stakeholder meeting, primarily with public officials from the Ministry of Health and other key stakeholders earlier this year in July 2021. And my colleague Alessandra later in the presentation will go over the overall objectives of that meeting and the key outcomes and next steps going forward. So I will now hand over to Jason Bauer, who will go over the market assessment methodology, key findings, recommendations, and conclusions. Thank you.
Thanks, Petra. Next slide, thanks. Great. So in terms of the market assessment methodology, we tried to look at all the key elements required to assess the market status of medical abortion medicines in Argentina, starting with the legal framework, the policy environment, the clinical guidelines, the national strategy on medical abortion and abortion care. What was the current process and status of medical abortion medicines in the country and of safe abortion services, the costs of abortion and abortion care and accessing that. As mentioned above, what MA products were currently available in the market, how were medicines regulated in Argentina, and what's the process for registering new medicines. We looked at the systems of procurement and distribution of medicines in Argentina, and specifically MA products. And through all of this, we were then seeking to identify key enablers and barriers to product introduction. So we put together a comprehensive questionnaire covering all of those elements, and we worked through these with CEDES. CEDES particularly used that framework to direct their discussions with key stakeholders representing the different market sectors and actors in the supply chain. They talked to several of the small number of NGO providers in the country. They talked to some private providers and visited pharmacies, trying to understand the mechanics of drug procurement and distribution in those different supply chains. But also, as well as that, to understand what's the current status of abortion provision in the country for those services, and what they thought, or how they thought the new law might affect the provision of those services. Although that turned out to be quite hard to predict. But also, as part of the stakeholder discussions, we had a meeting with key members of the Ministry of Health, NURHT and ANLAP, who are NURHT being the National Drug Regulatory Agency in Argentina. And that was to better understand the regulatory systems in Argentina, because they are quite complex, and to understand specifically how we could register MA products. But I'm pleased to report that all of the Ministry of Health folks that we talked to were really supportive of accelerating and expanding access to medical abortion medicines. Next slide, thanks. So this just shows the mapping of key stakeholders who should be engaged in the forward strategy to increase access to medical abortion medicines, as well as the medical abortion medicines manufacturers in the country, who are not listed here. And just noting that the work we did, as Petra mentioned, it culminated with a high-level stakeholder meeting with many of these actors, and Alessandra will go into a little more detail there after my slides. Next slide, thanks. So this slide here is just reiterating that best practice clinical advice on medical abortion and the benefit of the addition of mifepristone, either used as a single ingredient product or as part of the combi pack, the mifepristone and misoprostol combi pack. And as we know, mifepristone increases the safety and efficacy of medical abortion substantially and is recommended by WHO. And so whilst misoprostol has been available in Argentina for a few years, the addition of mifepristone products would be a really important step to accelerating safe and effective access. In terms of clinical guidelines in Argentina, one of the key findings there was that the Ministry of Health's National Directorate of Sexual and Reproductive Health were actually well ahead of the curve with their guidelines. It was really good news. In 2019, in their most recent national guidelines on safe abortion care, they anticipated the availability of mifepristone, and so had already included in those guidelines regimens with mifepristone and in line with international best practice. But those guidelines even now are being updated in accordance with the law change. Next slide, thanks. So rather than going through all of the key findings across all of those areas, just going to focus on what we saw as key enablers to introduction of medical abortion drugs and barriers, and then our conclusions and recommendations. So the first enabler there was that there was already a registered misoprostol products, some that had been on the market for a few years and available privately through pharmacies, but also another product had been manufactured and registered recently, very recently in February this year, by a national public manufacturer. And so that's helpful and helps to understand how other products can be accelerated similarly. There's been, because of all of the debate, the public debate over the law, the new law, and increasing the availability of information about products, that's really helped. It's probably helped drive demand and destigmatize accessing abortion by the general population. So that's great news. As mentioned, there's comprehensive and evidence-based clinical care guidelines. There's another enabler could be that there's the potential that we could improve information available to patients through addition of prescriber information leaflets that are specific to medical abortion indications, given that the medicines that are there have quite limited information about their appropriate use for medical abortion. But that's a potential enabler. Hopefully there could be a competitive price for quality assured products. It's not the case at the moment, but with the new product being manufactured by a public laboratory or manufacturer in Argentina, we hope that that will drive down the price. And as mentioned, there's a really motivated and supportive national health authorities and civil society around medical abortion products. Next slide, thanks. So looking at barriers to the introduction of medical abortion drugs, some of these we listed. There's currently somewhat of a monopoly there in terms of who's manufacturing the product, and it's a little complicated in the Argentinian market. the conditionality of supply, in that prescriptions are required to access medical abortion products, and medical doctors are the only ones who can provide that service. Currently, the high cost of purchase, which is an issue which I think they're working out how that's going to translate, because part of the new law has included states specifically that the abortion care must be provided free of charge. So it's to be determined how that's going to work when the cost of purchase of the drugs are quite high currently. Obviously, a lack of mifepristone products registered is a key barrier at the moment. And globally, even there's few suppliers of mifepristone products, quality assured ones, which could be a barrier. There was a lack of clarity about regulatory requirements for registration from NURHT, and we've sought to improve that and to discuss that a little further. But it does require a lot more work to specifically understand how mifepristone and the Combi Pack could be registered, and that means discussions between NURHT and interested parties, the manufacturers who are manufacturing now. There's a lack of consistent bioequivalence and clinical data requirements from stringent regulatory agencies. So how medical abortion products have been registered by SRAs has been diverse, and that makes it tricky to understand what's most appropriate to proceed with for Argentina. And there's difficulty in identifying suitable reference products, which could be used by local manufacturers or any potential manufacturers for Argentina. Because the one finding with, in terms of registering medical abortion products in Argentina is that if you are, instead of doing bioequivalence studies, you can register products simply by showing pharmaceutical equivalence, which isn't as difficult. But if you do that, you need to use all of the same indications and dosages and clinical information that exist on the product that you use as a reference product, which is difficult because reference products that are out there at the moment all have different indications and different administration routes, and are not necessarily in line with WHO or best international practice. And then another barrier, as we all might be aware, is the cost of API of mifepristone, which is quality assured. That's a big international concern, which also is a problem for potential products in Argentina. So next slide, thanks. So our conclusions and concluding remarks there. So the new law now mandates the provision of free comprehensive abortion care across Argentina in line with WHO best practice clinical recommendations. So we expect to see a massive increase in access, we would hope, to safe abortion care. Whilst 2 manufacturers are now making misoprostol products available, the addition of mifepristone will significantly increase the efficacy and safety of medical abortion regimen. So there should be lots of efforts focused on that. So whilst the regulatory requirements of medicines in Argentina are publicly available, they are complex, and there is often specific guidance provided for specific products, and these products would benefit from such specific guidance in order to assist and accelerate product development and registration time. Accurate forecasting of medical abortion product requirements is complicated. It's complicated by a lack of clinical data and underreporting currently. And of course, needs will change significantly with the introduction of the new law, with increased access to these products and to these services, and once mifepristone products are introduced as well. So that's going to be a real challenge, and something that will require a lot of effort to keep on top of until things equilibrate. And also good clinical guidelines are already in place, which include mifepristone and are now being updated to reflect the new legal status. So that's great news. One limitation there was that training of providers is not adequate currently, and really is something that needs to be scaled up. And so whilst the clinical guidelines are there, awareness of how to manage clients accessing the services does need improvement there. I'll leave it at that and pass on to Alessandra to take the next slides.
Thank you, Jason. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. Could you go to the next slide, please? Next one. Yes, I will talk about the virtual meeting that we had with stakeholders. So on July 2nd, a consultative meeting was held with the main national government agencies related to health policies and sexual and reproductive health supplies availability, as well with other public and civil society institutions, with the purpose of contributing to making progress in the medical abortion provision in Argentina, pursuant to what is established by the Voluntary Interruption of Pregnancy Law and Post-Abortion Care Law. The meeting was convened by Concept Foundation and CEDES, and the purpose of this meeting was to present the results of the market assessment on medical abortion drugs in Argentina as a supply to promote a technical and political discussion to advance on ensuring medical abortion drugs availability following the highest global health technology quality standards. Key government officials from Argentinian Ministry of Health, the National Agency of Public Laboratories, and LIF, the Pharmaceutical Industrial Laboratory from Santa Fe, participated in this meeting. Among the attendees, we also had organizations like the Fundación para Estudio e Investigación de la Mujer, FEM, the Reproductive Health Supply Coalition, and FOROLAC, organizations which have been historically committed to sexual and reproductive rights in the country and in the region. Next slide, please. Yeah. Key points and outcomes from the meetings are basically 2021 is an important year for Argentina, is a key time to advance the safe abortion agenda with medications. The conditions in the country are good to advance this agenda. As to the conditions, the Argentinian context is now very productive. It has a very progressive law as compared to the rest of Latin American region. Its national government has a very active political commitment, which was evident not only with the pressure it exerted for the law to be passed, but also in the commitment with the design of a legal and voluntary access to abortion health policy following the highest safety standards. This context represents, no doubt, a huge capital. It also represents a strategic opportunity for Argentina. Argentina has a strategic opportunity to position itself as the country of reference for medical abortion in the region, considering that Argentina has the necessary capacity to advance a production strategy that may allow it to supply not only the national market, but also other markets in Latin America. Therefore, this is a key moment for a strategical discussion on what is the country's goal as regards the production of abortion medication. It was also discussed the importance of advancing registration of the Combi Pack quickly and with a complete holistic approach. As to the challenge, though there is already an ongoing process for mifepristone production, there is a need to speed up the decisions related to the introduction of Combi Pack. The Combi Pack is the gold standard for medical abortion. Argentina could, in short term, advance not only in production or procurement of mifepristone, but also in the purchase and even production of the Combi Pack. Given the impact that COVID-19 has had on the access to the first quality health services, it is extremely important to strengthen voluntary interruption of pregnancy self-care policies and to give women the possibility of using the Combi Pack at home with the adequate accompaniment. And this is what currently is being done all over the world. Another important point that was discussed during the meeting was the role of LIF, the Pharmaceutical Industrial Laboratory from Santa Fe, in the provision of abortion medication in Argentina. LIF was established as a public laboratory with the purpose of producing and supplying medication for free to the government of Santa Fe and other provincial governments through the signing of agreements. So LIF has expanded its frontiers and is moving forward with an abortion medication production agenda, which considers the supply to other provinces in the country, and is also working on the production of mifepristone with technical support of Concept Foundation. It's also worth mentioning that the Ministry of Health authorities acknowledge the capacity that the national production matrix has to produce the medication with highest standard, which will in time make it possible to supply the national market with the necessary products to ensure safe abortion. LIF already produces misoprostol, so eventually they would manufacture the Combi Pack. And finally, it was discussed the importance of guaranteeing supply to private sector. Given that the law establishes the responsibilities for medical abortion provision, not only for the public subsector, but also to the social security and private ones, solutions shall be found that make it possible to ensure access to abortion medication in all of these, including also the availability of products in drugstores, so that women and individuals capable of gestating may self-manage their abortion. As outcomes of meeting, is worth to highlight the recognition of the capacity of the national productive matrix to produce medicines with the best standards, which will allow supply to guarantee safe abortions in the national market and positioning in the regional market, and the need to advance towards a model of access to technology that not only relies on health services, but also allows self-management of abortions. Next slide, please. So the final thoughts that we would like to share are, next slide, please. Yes. The market assessment on medical abortion drugs in Argentina has brought strategic value and opportunity of market assessment conducted by an alliance of organizations with a high technical profile, with legitimacy given by the technical expertise of Concept Foundation, providing technical assistance in reproductive health medicine's context. And this assessment also added the value of identifying contextual and regulatory conditions that would facilitate or operate as barriers to advance access to medical abortion, and provided the strategical contribution of a technical political meeting with key actors involved in decisions related to the policy of assurance of supplies for abortion. So this is what we had for sharing. And Mariana and Silvina, considering your important contribution in this work, I would like to ask if you have anything to share or add.
Thank you, Alessandra. As far as, this is Mariana, good morning. As far as I can see, there's a couple of questions on the chat. If we want to address them first, and then we can see if there's anything else to add.
Hi, thank you. This is Sophia Hassan joining again, and I will help with the moderation of the Q&A as was just mentioned. So we'll go ahead and begin with that. And I see that we have a question from Frank Vandeluge asking, can you elaborate on the requirements of manufacturers?
Hi, thanks, Frank. It's Jason here. Yeah, so we detailed in the document, we summarized these requirements relevant to medical abortion medicines. So I do encourage you to look at the document for that information. But in summary, there's 3 different routes through NURHT that you can register potentially medical abortion products. The first one is for if there's already the product available in, if there's a similar product available in Argentina already, then you're able to register a product if you demonstrate that it's similar to that one, or demonstrate that the product is similar to a product from an Annex 1 country. Sorry, we're getting into some technical details here, but that's probably the most common used pathway. A second pathway is for products that already have what we would call SRA approvals, although that's defined differently by Argentinian the Argentinian regulatory authority, and that this, I guess, addresses Natalie's question as well. Those Annex 1 countries include a lot of the usual SRA countries, like several European countries and US and Canada, but it doesn't include certain other SRA countries. But if you have the product registered in one of those countries, then you should be able to get a streamlined registration through NURHT. And you can, in fact, get an import permit to import those products quite quickly without registration first. So those are the main routes, but like I said, I would refer you to the document. The bioequivalence or equivalence requirements are quite interesting and specific to Argentina. Generally, you don't need to do clinical bioequivalence studies to register generic products in Argentina, as pharmaceutical equivalence can be considered adequate. But the other side of that means that if you're just demonstrating pharmaceutical equivalence rather than doing a whole clinical bioequivalence study, then you have to mimic the exact same clinical particulars for that product in your generic or your similar product. That means using the same indications, the same dosages, etc., etc. I hope that gives some information, but but feel free to ask more questions.
Thank you, Jason. And I see that you.
One final thing. Sorry, Sophia. In terms of WHO, Argentina doesn't participate in the collaborative mechanism for accelerated WHO products that have been pre-qualified by the WHO pre-qualification program. So if a product's pre-qualified by WHO, that actually doesn't give you a significant benefit in terms of registering the product in Argentina. Although I'm sure most of the groundwork is there to register such a product and to provide the necessary information. Thanks.
Okay, and I see that while Samia had asked about the indications for which miso is registered, Jason, you responded in the chat. Was there anything else you wanted to say regarding that?
I mean, nothing further from me, well, except what I've just said, which is that, I mean, these two products have quite vague indications. And if you're going to register a new product, as mentioned, it would probably have to mimic the indications of either the existing products or the reference product that you'd chosen as an SRA reference product. Despite these indications, it seems to be common practice in Argentina that prescribers just go ahead and give their own instructions. Although they're vaginal tablets, actually the two products available are vaginal tablets, but it seems commonplace in Argentina to be used off-label, buccally or sublingually. So it does seem that the indications are not a major obstacle in terms of the product being used and available, but obviously that could have an impact on the information available to patients.
Okay, and because it seems that you have answered Natalie Williams' question, and we do have another couple of questions here in the chat box, I'll move on. Jithu asked, what would be the channel for MA products in Argentina? Do you anticipate that it would be a government purchase, or is there the possibility of retail? Any of you who would like to answer that question?
Mariana or Silvina, would you like to respond, or would you prefer I have a stab?
Sure. This is Mariana. Well, what we anticipate is that the government will buy the products to distribute among the public health services. The government can buy it through UNFPA. It can buy it through an international bet, or it can buy it from a local market. You know, there's different options. Of course, if it is available in the country, you know, that is a better choice, because it shortens, you know, the time frame and also the requirements that are needed to buy these products. But it's important that it's also available in pharmacies, because you know, for a private provider or for the woman herself, just to be able to go to a pharmacy with a prescription and obtain you know, the medical abortion pills is important. So that is the reason why we think it should be registered and have a more wider availability of these products, regardless of the type of provider or the type of medical insurance that you have. I don't know if that answers the question.
Thank you, Mariana. And while I see that Natalie Kapp, our co-chair, of the SAS work stream had entered a question. Silvia Ramos has just entered a response to that question. Natalie had asked if any other countries from the region were involved in the technical political meetings. And so, as I said, Silvina responded. Is there anything that anyone would like to elaborate on regarding those, the scope of the technical political meetings and the potential presence or involvement of other countries in the future?
No, I'm fine with that. It was mainly Argentina, but I'm not sure if you want to share anything more, Silvina.
Yeah, I would like to add something. Hi, good morning, everybody. Silvia Ramos is speaking. Besides the answer I just provided to Natalie on the chat, I would like to add two thoughts on this respect. One is to stress the importance of conducting this kind of assessment, of market assessment, and this kind of meeting. Not only that it's basic and it's the most important thing, the technical assistance to the Argentinian government, but also to use this kind of assessment and this meeting as an advocacy tool. Because as you may know, as well as we know, the decisions about the abortion policy are always kind of a mix of feelings and challenges, not only based on technical aspects, but mostly on political aspects. So even when having, and even Argentina having one of the most progressive laws in the region, the government and the commitment of the government, we still need some push. And this political meeting, in our view, and the market assessment firstly, and then the technical political meeting have played this role of pushing the government to, I'm not sure to take decisions, but to put the decisions on their agendas. And so this is the first step. And then we will tell you how this moves forward. But I think it's very important to bear in mind that the political aspect of these processes. And in Argentina, this has proven to be very, very useful.
Thank you, Silvina. Veronique Dupont has asked a question regarding also regarding the stakeholders meeting. She is asking, were there any informal commitments or steps identified by government officials and other participants to address the key barriers to Combi-Pack introduction, both in the public and private sectors? Can any of you speak to her question or to a portion of her question?
Many points were discussed there, and these products now are considered essential. But I think that Mariana and Silvina could explore more this topic.
Yeah, I could add on this respect that we need to be, sorry to say this, but very patient, because these processes are really very complex. And in my country, there's very difficult political situation at present. But what I can assure is that the government have moved a little bit forward since that technical and political meeting. And now we are elaborating a brief, once again, another document, but this is how things move, to hold a meeting with the chief of staff of the Ministry of Health to put the Combi-Pack production in the agenda more, let's say, more directly. And we are taking all the data and the arguments of the market assessment and preparing this short brief to her in order to hold that meeting, and once again to push them to take another decision. So this is how things move here. I'm not sure that this is the rule for the whole world, but in Argentina, these little decisions makes things move forward. And now we are preparing, as I said, this new step in the dialogue with the Chief of Staff of the Ministry of Health. Mariana, I don't know if you want to add something on this respect.
Just one small thing that because there's a donation that is coming and arriving very soon in the country of combi pack. There were some preparations regarding the technical report that it has to be prepared for the NURHT, the regulatory agency, in order to issue a waiver to allow that medication to be distributed in the country. So those are also steps into moving forward for the agency to know the product, to know the evidence, to feel comfortable about having the product distributed in the country, and also to sense how many providers and women are happy about using it. And the results of it, of course.
Thank you. And Guillermo Ortiz asked a question in the chat regarding the existing box, the packaging for misoprostol, and a referral to vaginal use. Would any of you like to comment regarding that?
Well, the insert of the available products in Argentina states that it is a product for vaginal use. The reason for that, it was because it was an extension of a product that was registered before, misoprostol 25 micrograms used for cervical ripening. And so any changes in the insert would be seen as a major change. And so, both 200 micrograms misoprostol products are for vaginal use, and that's, and the indication is the only change that is modified in the insert. We are pushing for a product that has buccal or oral indication, but it seems that requires a different procedure, and it's not available in the country yet.
Thank you, Mariana. And given that we're at just a couple of minutes before the hour, and it seems that all of the questions have been pretty much addressed, we want to just again thank all of our presenters. Thanks to Petra, Jason, and Alessandra from the Concept Foundation. And also thank you so much to Mariana and Silvina representing CEDES so helpfully today. And I see that Milka has chimed in the comment box to ensure that everyone is aware that tomorrow this webinar will be provided in the Spanish language for our Aforo-Lat members of the coalition. So On that note, thank you all very much for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.